Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is a prep coach. Today's guest is Mike Courtney. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Mike. So I want to kind of find out, the first question I have for you is, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
It's pretty simple for me. It's Ronnie Coleman. I'm sure that's a lot of people's favorite bodybuilder, but if there was no Ronnie, I don't know if I would ever have gotten into bodybuilding. I started off, opening up a Flex magazine and seeing the freak of all freaks, and just thought how, that must just be insane having that kind of mass and just the looks he must get and just being on that level. And so literally from 15, 16 years old, I was like, I want to be this freaky 300-pound bodybuilder, and it was like, I'm sure the same dream many of us have, but that was definitely, really inspired me immensely,
So is Ronnie like the first like real bodybuilder you ever saw then when you opened up that magazine?
Yep. It was, he was on the cover. He was literally on the cover. It was a Flex magazine. And I don't know what it was. It just captivated me. I just didn't even know that existed. It was a world. I grew up in a little country town, little cowboy town, Oakdale, California. It's known as the cowboy capital of the world. There was no bodybuilders in Oakdale, California. So that to me was like a foreign, I didn't even know what it was, and obviously bodybuilding doesn't get a lot of exposure on TV. You'll see the occasional strongman or something like that, but bodybuilding to me was foreign. And so, and I'm very much an obsessive kind of person. So like when I get into something, I'm 120%. There's no breaks. It's all gas, Yeah. And I've been that way my whole life. And so, I ended up buying every DVD he had that I get my hands on, and I would just watch them over and over. And I probably made a lot of the same mistakes that every young bodybuilder does. I'm going to eat and train like Ronnie Coleman. Okay. And that is exactly, my results and his results seem very different. Right. But that was the gateway.
For sure. No, that's cool. And it's crazy because back, it's not that long ago, but back when we were growing up, all we had was the magazines, and it's like, there was no social media. There was no YouTube yet. It's like you had the magazines, and that's really all you knew about bodybuilding, the bodybuilding lifestyle, the training, the eating. And so it's like most of us grew up with magazines and just copying what we saw in there because that was like the gospel, right?
It was. And back then, now obviously I know there's more of a business side and they're all trying to sell a product, and, there's a whole nother side to it. But back then, in that kind of innocent, those first years of bodybuilding, you just, that's the pre-workout I need to get huge, and that's all it takes. Okay. And you're, again, as a teenager, you just kind of take that until you start kind of finding other mentors and people to kind of go, oh, hold on, let me take you under my wing and kind of show you, a little more of the light.
Yeah. Good. Those are the good old days. So when did you actually start lifting weights? What age, and kind of what was the reason? Was it for sports or something else?
Yeah. So I've been in sports pretty much my whole life. As a kid, I played soccer. I was that kid that all the coaches wanted me to play football because I always had a real big frame. I was always a big kid. My mom always called me Husky, right. I was just a naturally big kid, kind of that corn-fed white boy. But for whatever reason, I liked soccer, but I was just a tank out there. I should have been playing tackle football, but it just didn't appeal to me for whatever reason. So then I went on to, I did that through, junior high, and then into junior high, I got into wrestling. And that's kind of when I found a little bit more of like my niche, or, I was like, I'm pretty strong, and that's kind of where I got my introduction to, really kind of an outlet of more aggression and, you're coming into a young man, you're starting to have that testosterone, so that's when that kind of started to really manifest. That was probably my first few exposures to a weight room or any kind of real extreme physical fitness. Okay. So I did that for a while. And then I actually got into like shot and disc in high school through shot and discus. And every time we went into the weight room, I just gravitated towards it. And then, like I said, I finally discovered a Flex magazine, and that was all she wrote. I joined we had a little gym, little mom and pop ran gym right there in Oakdale. And I just got my license. And so I drive myself to the gym, I think I did bench press probably every day, like most teenagers, I was that stereotypical, teenager just thinking, oh, if I could bench 225, I would be huge. And then 225 becomes, 315. And it just kind of goes from there. But that was kind of the emphasis of it all.
Okay. Now, when you started lifting weights, like kind of through sports and stuff at school, was there a PE teacher or like a strength coach that was able to instruct you guys, or were you guys kind of on your own in the weight room when you were a teenager?
I mean, I had coaches that I looked up to. I remember my wrestling coach was just this massive man. So I think I always looked up to the big guy, right? And it wasn't necessarily, I didn't back then really know that it's because of any kind of workout routine that he necessarily had, but he just was this huge guy, right? And when I did start going to the gym, Mr. Machado was his name. He was the gym owner out there in Oakdale, and he was kind of a crotchety old dude, and I think he did bodybuilding and powerlifting, and he did show me a lot of the very first exercises that I ever really did. And I kind of figured out pretty quickly that I got strong very fast. I was really strong from a young age. Even as a teenager, I was pretty strong. I remember the first time the first time I squatted, I think, and I'm sure my form was terrible, but I was squatting 315, and that was the first time I ever squatted, but so that was kind of like where it started. And like I said, he did show me some stuff. From there, I started, because again, I'm so obsessive, right? I really had my ear to the ground, just trying to I would ask every big guy. I was never afraid to ask people, and try to get information. And that's kind of where I met my first coach. I want to say I was about 17, 18, somewhere in there. And that was Austin Day. What's his last name? Austin. He owned the Fit Factory out in Modesto. And at that point, I was already getting certified as a personal trainer. I was going through all the different personal training stuff, and I was taking the powerlifting classes at the junior college once I graduated. And he was the first bodybuilding mentor I had that kind of taught me how to diet, and and then I started working at a GNC while I was getting certified to personal. I mean, kind of I would imagine a pretty similar story that most coaches probably have, or bodybuilders, or whatever. So nothing spectacular, as far as that goes. I'm sure a lot of guys have a similar story as far as how they started, working at your local GNC, working at your local gyms, just trying to get plugged in, trying to find information. I'd say the biggest thing is I was just so hungry for information, and I always have been. I've always been a very just always wanting to learn, never afraid to try to open up a book or try to study or try to learn something, as long as it had to do with what I was into, as long as it wasn't math or something,
Yeah, you and me both on the math one, that's for sure. Okay, now before we kind of fully dive into coaching, bodybuilding, and all that, I do want to take a quick step back. Now, you said you grew up in a pretty small town in Northern California. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the Central Valley. Kind of, if anybody knows where like Modesto is, there's a little podunk town called Oakdale, about 30 minutes inward, east of it. And that was pretty much, where I grew up. And like I said, just everyone there was a cowboy. I wasn't really a cowboy back then per se. I was just a kid trying to figure out my own way, I guess.
What was your relationship like with your parents? Were you an only child, or do you have siblings?
No, I got a brother and a sister. My parents were always super supportive. I did a lot of music and stuff back then as well. And my parents always, any endeavor that I was trying to get into, they encouraged. And actually, it was kind of funny because like my dad, in fact, he's in town visiting me right now. Me man, we did all kinds. He never did like a bodybuilding competition, but he would work out with me, right? And I was actually the one that got him into the gym when I was in my, my teenage years. And so we'd work out together and kind of learned a lot of the first working out, as far as like having, a training split and, having different, bodybuilding nutrition or workout, nutrition, all that kind of stuff. A lot of that was, him and I kind of figured out. And so always super supportive. But fast forward in my first couple of bodybuilding competitions, I'll never forget. I was still living at home because I was young. I was, 18 years old, and I'm cooking tilapia in my mom's, oven, and they're coming home and like, it freaking reeks in here. What, what is that smell? And I have like pounds and pounds of tilapia I'm cooking, and asparagus, and, it just smells like a fish fart in there. It's gross. Yeah. But, they supported me. They just kind of let me do my thing, and they showed up to my competitions, and, and that was kind of where it all started, I guess,
Yeah. Now, one last thing in terms of kind of your upbringing and childhood, is there anything that you feel like your parents or a coach or, a teacher, an adult kind of like, positively impacted you? I know you said that first gym you went to, he kind of taught you how to start lifting weights, but maybe outside of like the bodybuilding lifting realm, but just like within life, did your parents ever like say the same thing to you all the time? Or did a coach or a teacher or some sort of adult might have like some sort of positive impact or influence on you that kind of like maybe, plays into who you are at this point?
Yeah, I would say probably my dad, just in the sense of he's, my dad's the hardest worker I've ever known. He's 68 years old, and he's still working. Yeah. He's just one of those, that other generation, that just could work through anything. And so I think a lot of that kind of tied into my upbringing and seeing that. And, I carry that into my career, my coaching business, my work ethic in the gym. That was all really instilled in me, is just to work hard. And if you're not working, you're not achieving anything. So you got to just keep on, day in, day out. It's the cumulative effect of it all. Right.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Very cool. Okay. So when did you do your first competition? It sounds like you were pretty young.
Yeah, I want to say it was like 2007. I think it was 2007. I believe it was the Modesto, I think they called it the Central Valley Classic out there in Modesto. I was 183 pounds on stage.
That's not too bad though for your first one being.
Yeah,
how old were you in 2007?
19.
Okay.
19, I believe. And so that was kind of what kicked it off. And then from there it was, I think altogether now I've probably done 16 competitions, not counting powerlifting, because I also took a few years off where I just focused on powerlifting. Because like I said, I've always been, to be honest with you, and it's probably why I became such a good coach. I never had like the best genetics from a bodybuilding standpoint. I think I was always meant to be more, to be honest, if anything, a power lifter or strongman. Just if you just look at my frame or my bones, like I'm built for strength sports. The difference was I just loved how bodybuilders looked, right? I loved that look and I loved that aesthetic. But naturally there was a time I was benching over 600 pounds. There was a time I was squatting, mid sevens and deadlifting, deadlift was always kind of the struggle bus for me. I was a harder lift, just kind of short arms, but, I was deadlifting 650 pounds. And so I was strong, and that came a lot easier than getting super shredded for a competition, so that's where I really had to learn a lot to really kind of bypass my genetics and make, be able to get that look that I wanted for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how did that first competition go? And you said you actually had a coach, which back in 2007, 2006, 2007, coaches aren't what they are today in terms of, jump on Instagram and you find a coach, right? So how did you actually come across that first coach, and how did that first competition go for you?
So he owned a supplement shop in Modesto. And so that's, I met him that way, and I'd go in and just pick his brain when I was buying protein and whatever else. And he was always really willing, especially for us young guys, to give out information. And then as I got certified I went through NASM originally, and I ended up actually working at his gym that he owned in exchange for him coaching me for free. And it was old school. There was no pictures. It was drive to my gym and let me take a look at you. And then he would tell me, all right, change this, change that. And then you could go make those changes. I mean, there wasn't even a typed diet. It was just, very much just kind of word of mouth. Just, he's going to tell me what to do, And so, yeah, you're right. Coaching and everything has evolved immensely since those early days, but yeah, so he was kind of like I said, the first coach to really give me, proper guidance and kind of really focus me in. And I ended up placing, I think I got 5th in the Open, if I remember right. So I mean, I placed for my first show, and I was super young, and there's a lot of guys a lot older than me up there. So, I mean, that was cool. But, looking back now, those pictures are pretty laughable, Definitely.
Did you enjoy the process though? I mean, did you really enjoy it or not so much?
I did enjoy it. I worked my ass off back. I mean, I tell people this when they do their first show, like I always think your first couple shows are the hardest just because you don't even really know what to expect. There's so many unknowns. And I think one of the biggest problems a lot of people have, if they've never gotten extremely lean, I mean, I'm talking stage ready lean, they don't even have that belief that they can do it. So it's all kind of, you're fighting this disbelief as you go along, right? Until you kind of hit that finish line and you get that kind of rush, and then you realize, man, okay, I did it, and then it gets a little easier from there. So I do remember it being extremely challenging, completely against the grain of anything I had ever done before. Like I said, again, just being that corn-fed kid, right? Like grew up eating, mom's casserole and just whatever I wanted. And my main protein source was probably milk back then, just drinking, tons of milk and everything else. Like there was no real structure. And then the next thing you're eating, back then I was eating a lot of like canned tuna, because I was in college and stuff. So you're eating a lot of canned tuna, canned asparagus, or canned green beans, and chicken breast that was just dry as hell. Cause I was just talking to a client the other day, and I was like, man, like dieting nowadays is so much easier because they've got sugar-free sauces, and they've got, Flavor God seasoning, and they've got meal prep companies, and like none of that was around. There wasn't any of that stuff, not to any real extent,
Yeah.
So,
okay. So then, you said, you went to, college. So, what did you kind of go and study? What was your focus in terms of that? Because then sounds like you were also going to get your PT certification. So just kind of talk about, before, again, we kind of transition to more bodybuilding coaching, like where you're at today. I want to get a little bit more of the background. So talk about going to college, getting your PT certifications, and just kind of working your way into like what you're up to current day, right? Like unpack your coaching story, and then we'll kind of, coincide that with the bodybuilding stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, there was a lot of kind of what took place. I mean, it just, like you said, to unravel it would be, there was a lot to it, but I was torn. I wanted to, my passion was bodybuilding. My passion was fitness. I loved helping people. And so that was a big part. And especially being in a community that didn't really have that. It was a very cool experience. A Gold's Gym ended up opening in that town in Oakdale just months after I had gotten certified. So it was almost a godsend in that, and it was literally like from the ground up, I was able to be there. And so being able to help people and really watch how it impacted their lives and changed their lives. And this is a bunch of people in a little, like I said, small town that have never been exposed to any real level of fitness, and so to be able to help them, it really pulled on like, okay, what do I want to do with my life and my career? And I was originally going to school. I took I took every criminal justice class out there. I was going to school to get into law enforcement. And in fact, I think one of the things that people don't realize about me is I still work in law enforcement. I guess so. Really, going back to the whole Ronnie Coleman thing,
There we go.
He did a similar kind of a similar thing, but yeah, so but back then I decided actually I'm gonna take a break from school and just focus on getting certified. And so I went through and I finished NASM, and I was taking on clients, I was making money, I was growing my business. And then I would say what kind of really started to kind of steer me is I ended up, I was dating, she's now my ex-wife, but we were dating back then, and she wanted to get into bodybuilding. She was just a little runner, and kind of helped her get started in her bodybuilding journey. Right. She was a little long distance runner, and she never even touched her weight and was shredded. She just naturally had very good genetics. And I was able to kind of get her on her first diet and help her with her first few shows and the whole bit. And long story short, you fast forward, and she ended up, I'm sure you probably heard the name Shannon Courtney. She was quite the up and coming bodybuilder, because she ended up turning pro in women's bodybuilding. And, and I had my son with her. And so that kind of was like really kind of in the first infancy of coaching, because then her and I had a bunch of clients, and that was when the brand really started to build. And I had a lot of other people kind of coming out of the woodwork. It's like, hey, can you help me get ready for a show? And I helped him get ready for a show, and he ended up winning the show. And, it just like, so it kind of was like, well, maybe I have something here, maybe I'm on to something. Maybe all this research and all this OCD that I have sitting here studying and trying to learn all this different stuff, and just being a vacuum for information is starting to pay off. And then from there, obviously I was still bodybuilding myself, and I was able to get on some sponsorships, and those sponsorships led to me working for a supplement company as well early on. And then from there, I was a marketing director for LG Sciences. And that was kind of my first step into that field. And I was still coaching people as well. And then from there, I was able to, there was another, like, basically they were going to build an Anytime Fitness right there in my hometown, and it fell through, and another gal bought it, but she had no clue how to run a gym, but all the equipment from the Anytime Fitness was there. So I think they called it Downtown Fitness. And I basically went in there, and I was like, hey, I'm pretty seasoned at this point. I think I was 20.3, somewhere in there. I was like, I'm a pretty seasoned personal trainer. This is my kind of, my resume essentially. I could build you a training studio here. And, so we kind of worked out pricing and worked out all that kind of stuff. And that's what I did. So then I went from golds to that. And I basically had my little training studio right there. And I was able to train, just all sorts of different, everyone from bodybuilders to just average Joe wanting to get in shape, but it was all one-on-one still. Unfortunately, my ex-wife and I ended up divorcing though. I moved to Reno, the long story short kind of thing. And I moved to Reno. I started renting space at a big powerlifting gym up there, and I'm training, and it's growing, it's doing well. But then I start looking at wanting something. At this point, I'm like 24, 25, needing, don't have healthcare, don't have retirement, don't have any of those other things that would be nice to have. I was paying the bills, I was doing okay, but I didn't have all that. So I ended up actually, this was also during the time I took a little bit of a break after my divorce from bodybuilding and competitions. And I got into competitive powerlifting, did a couple powerlifting meets. And I, really was able to really learn a whole nother level of exercise physiology and leverages and just a different side. And it's all stuff to me that really kind of goes in line, it goes back and forth between bodybuilding and it's, the carryover is huge, especially when you're talking about building out programs, workout programs and things for clients. So what I learned from that really carried with me quite a bit. But I did well in the powerlifting stint. During that time, I took a little break from the one-on-one training, went through the academy. And then basically once I started my career in law enforcement, I still had a ton of people reaching out, just a lot of people wanted me to coach them. But I was like, hey, I'm not at a gym anymore, but let's do this thing online. And so that's kind of where it started. That's where the coaching really was like, I can do this thing and try to run it when I'm not working. Basically, I can reply to emails and I can get back to people as long as I can. So I took a lot of the same disciplines and that same work ethic that I learned from a young age in bodybuilding was able to apply that to my work life and my business. And I was basically able to double dip in the sense of having both a career and then a coaching business. And then as time has gone on, I've been able to really grow this coaching business into what it is now, where I'm, now I have clients from everywhere from, East Coast, Canada, down South, like pretty much everywhere. And I've got kind of infrastructure now where I can manage it. And then even with my my job, they work with me, and they know that I have shows that I have to go to on the weekends, and I'm able to work out as far as getting time off. And I work a 40-hour week in 3 days.
Wow.
So then I have 4 days off. And so the 4 days off from my career, I'm able to just focus on my coaching business, and so it does take a level of discipline. It takes a lot of that carryover that I've learned from competing and doing everything that I've done to really, get it to where it's at now. It took a lot of work, but now it's been fantastic, and I'm able to be fulfilled in that sense of like, I'm still back feeling in that place of like, okay, I'm helping people, I'm able to bring fitness to people that maybe couldn't have it, in their town that they're at,
Wow, that's cool. Now I got to ask you, because you said that you're in law enforcement. Now, are you like a police officer, or are you like what are you within law enforcement, or is that something you would rather not talk about?
No, I can talk about it. I don't usually put a whole lot out there. I try to keep it a little bit vague, but basically I work for the California Department of Corrections, and I'm a supervisor. And so I work with the worst of the worst. I work, like, where I'm at now is mainly all active gang members, and a lot of just making sure the bad guys stay behind bars, basically, right? And that's pretty much in a nutshell.
No, that's cool. I was curious because you were alluding to law enforcement. But it didn't sound like necessarily a police officer. So that's cool though, because like that, I mean, I think that's just a great example, because like you've got this, you're known for the coaching, the bodybuilding stuff, right? But then you've got this other whole career kind of on the backside that's providing another outlet, another source of revenue. I'm sure you've got all your benefits and insurance and all that stuff. So it's like, it's a win-win, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, it's quite the blessing, and and I'm not afraid to say that I'm proud of kind of what I was able to accomplish, and it can be challenging to have that balancing act and have both. And I'll be the first to admit it, but I think with the current economy and just kind of the way the world is, I think being able to have both is definitely advantageous. I don't have to there's no feast or famine. I don't have to worry about, oh, it's show season or it's not. Those are all things that would be something I'd have to had to face earlier, before I kind of made that switch. So yeah, it's one of those things. I don't put it out on social media a whole lot. I usually just keep my social media to just my coaching and to my passion, my hobby, that sort of thing. But it is definitely another big part of me, and what, has really helped me build my, my life the way I've built it, essentially.
I think that's cool. I think that's a great aspect of your life that people can kind of glean. Because, once you kind of get into the fitness bodybuilding world, it's like, it can be so all consuming. It can be very, there's just a lot within the fitness and bodybuilding community, like a lot of negativity. You can lose yourself. You can get sucked in, you can get pulled in, so many distractions. And I just think it's great for some of us to hear like, hey, you can have something completely different outside of bodybuilding fitness going on over here, and then also be involved in here and be very successful, one of the best in the fitness bodybuilding world. I think I bring it up a lot, but I think John Meadows was a great example, that he was a career guy working in the banking realm, was very high up, made a great living. And then when all of that was set in place and his family was set in his place and the house was paid for, then he really transitioned into the coaching and the YouTube, so, and there's a lot of guys that I've brought on that, not necessarily the coaches, but the athletes that they're working full-time jobs and they're chasing after that pro card. Some of them are IFBB pros and they're working, jobs outside of fitness. I think it's smart. Like you said, even, especially nowadays, in the times we're living in. So now I want to go back for a quick minute, Mike. When you were really young, you were just starting to like train and kind of coach people and stuff. You know, I guess maybe being in your hometown is probably an advantage because people knew you and your family, but did you ever was it ever difficult to try to get clients or anything when you were younger? Just because sometimes older people kind of look down on younger people, right? That's just the facts of it.
So, you know, back then, especially when I was still actively competing, you know, I was, you know, a walking billboard essentially, right? So it was a little easier to have those conversations sparked. I would say the only time where there was a little bit of difficulty getting clients was when I did relocate and I moved from where I was really known in the Central Valley and I'd built a pretty good name for myself and then relocated up to Reno, where I was obviously much less known, right? And I really had to start from kind of the ground up. And at that point, it was just a lot of word of mouth and just willing to be patient. And, you know, just a lot of like going in and talking to gyms, putting out cards, putting up flyers. There was a time where I worked at 3 different gyms training people because I was able to get clients from different areas, you know, and you just kind of had to make it, you know, it wasn't really much of a choice. It was just, you just kind of keep putting one foot after the, you know, after the other. And luckily it, you know, again, it worked out. You know, I think, you know, one thing that's always done well for me is usually once somebody works with me and they realize like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about, what he's telling me and teaching me is paying off and it's working, then a lot of times it's all word of mouth from there, right? And so they start telling their friends and I'm able to start, you know, getting more clients that way. You know, and then now I'm at a point where a lot of I would say my bread and butter of my business now is the competitive bodybuilding side. I do a lot of transformations. So like 12-week transformations with like normal people. And then I do a lot of just straight contest prep, you know, from people who want to do their first show to, you know, now having people going that I'm prepping for the Olympia, you know, and everywhere in between. And so I got people, you know, doing nationals at the end of the year and masters nationals and, you know, Olympia, amateur Olympia, all that stuff. So, but, you know, back then I was a little more reliant on just your normal housewives and normal, you know, Joe Blow getting off work and wanting to get back in shape and, you know, that kind of thing. And, but luckily I was able to, the clients that I did prep for shows were able to show up and win. I might not have been the most well-known guy, but, you know, when you've got the overall winner several times over, it starts to build, you know, a name and stuff. And so then I was able to build a name for myself up in the Reno area. And then over the last few years, especially once I myself stopped competing and I was able to put all my focus into, you know, coaching, you know, when I'm not at work, just coaching and really building that business and building that brand and actually, you know, marketing and having a website and really having that infrastructure at play. And that's when I was able to really get to the point now where it's, you know, I have clients just all over different time zones that I'm having to look at and things that I never even really anticipated. You know, there's times now where I'll drive my wife nuts because I'm setting my phone at 2:30 in the morning to wake up because I got a guy I got to peak for, you know, for Friday. You know, we make sure we got to make weight. We got to do this. We got to do that. We got to peak perfectly. Get him, you know, get him prepped. Get him on stage, you know, Saturday morning, and you know, or whatever else, you know. So it's some kind of crazy hours now, you know.
For sure. Now I want to ask. I've asked a lot of the coaches I've brought on the podcast this because I have my own personal opinion on it, but I'm always curious asking you guys that are elite coaches within the industry. Do you feel like training people in person for all the years that you did, and now you've more transitioned into the online coaching, do you feel like that was a great foundation and it taught you things that if you just started online, you maybe wouldn't have necessarily been able to learn or know or been as good of a coach or great of a coach that you are online and as a prep coach if you didn't have those years training the Gen Pop people in person?
100%.
Yeah,
without a doubt. That's an absolute, because I now know, you know, having done so many one-on-one sessions, hours and hours and hours of just, you know, one-on-one sessions and just having that anecdotal, you know, day in, day out time with clients, I know kind of what they need and what they need to see on paper. So like my diet plans, my workouts, my my supplement protocols, like everything that I'm putting into, you know, it's an exact roadmap, and it's so exact. I mean, literally it couldn't be more, you know, exact. Eat this at this time, take this at this time, you know, this is your workout for this day. This is your high carb day. This is your low carb day, blah, 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 blah. And so it's just like as kind of fail safe as I can really make it. And I think that's because I've had so much time really knowing what, you know, when I'm working one-on-one with somebody, what they really need and what they need to hear and what they need, you know, kind of what they need from their trainer or their coach or whatever you want to, you know, title that you want to call it. But, you know, I'm able to really have that knowledge of what it took to get those people to be successful. Okay. Well, now how do I transfer that into a broader scope of people? Right. And how do I get that out to, you know, like I said, people all over the nation or whatever, and working all that. And a lot of it is just being, number one, communication, make sure that line of communication is always there, that people are ask as many questions as they can. I try to be as 24/7 as I can. And I, again, have the infrastructure between my wife and myself to make sure that my clients are never left in the dark, because I think communication is probably one of the biggest parts of it. And then being as exact as I can when writing out these programs. I always tell clients, it's like, I'm going to write you a roadmap to a destination. You know, the destination, let's say if it's contest prep, it's to be peaked on show day, Saturday morning, December 17th, whatever. Right. So I'm going to write every little step that we're going to go. And every week you're going to check in, and I'm going to keep giving you the play-by-play of exactly what you need to do to get there. But if you decide, because you don't want to be disciplined and you don't want to pack your meals properly or whatever, and you end up going left when I told you to go right, you might end up close to where we were supposed to be peaked on the 17th, or you might end up somewhere completely else and you might be lost. You know what I mean? And so, and I'll do my best to try to get you back on track, but you know, I mean, a lot of it is, that is the other difference as far as you're not right there holding someone, you know, personally accountable. So you got to make sure that communication's there, and you're like, hey, you know, I can't tell you how many times I have to tell people, hey, you're not going to be ready for the show. You know, it's not going to happen. And this is what we're going to have to do. We're going to choose a different show, or, you know, hey, I'm looking at your pictures. I know you're not even close to what you're not doing what I've told you, you know, and I know that because, again, anecdotally, I've been doing this for so long. I can look at these pictures and say, yeah, okay, you didn't do a thing that I asked you to do, you know? So. Okay.
Now you said, or I guess, yeah, you said that you, at some point you just decided hey, like I got to give up this bodybuilding thing, and you're going to really start more focusing the free time outside of your other career on the coaching. Now, in terms of kind of like stopping competitive bodybuilding, was that pretty easy for you? And what was kind of the thought process? Was it just like, hey, like you just had to be real with yourself, be like, hey, Mike, like looking yourself in the mirror, like I just don't have the genetic potential or the genetics to kind of go where I want to go? Like, what was the thought process? What conversation did you have? What was the determining factor for you to kind of just say, you know what, I'm done competing myself, and I'm just going to put the rest of this energy into coaching?
So this is another one that it's kind of a multifaceted thing. It wasn't a decision that was made just overnight, you know. Being that I am such a kind of a competitive person, like I could see myself where I was advancing as a bodybuilder, but that leads a lot of limitations for you as a coach. If you're a good bodybuilder, that requires you to have a certain level of being self-absorbed and really just removed from every, you know, outside factors, and saying, okay, I have got to get this cardio done. I have got to do this. This meal has to be at this time. I got to prep all my food tonight at this time. And you've got to be, you know, again, it's a level of discipline that many people don't even understand. And that's how I lived my life for many, many, many years. I mean, literally from, like we talked about, being a teenager all the way through into my 30s. And so I could see where it was limiting what I could do as a coach. It limited how much I could bring on, how much I could handle, and even just the amount of attention that I was able to give. And while also balancing a career, right? Because I'm also doing that as well. And because I am still such a competitive person, I'm just showing up to work every day isn't necessarily good enough for me, right? I still want to also thrive here. Mm-hmm. And so it was a kind of multiple things happened. I do remember the exact years, 2019. Ironically, I was working actually at the time I was working with Blue Taylor, and it was the best I had ever looked. I was 200 in the mid 250s. I was lean. I got, I still every once in a while post an old picture on Instagram, or you can see it on my website. I've got a couple pictures where I'm very vascular and I'm big and I'm lean. And, that was like my year where I was really going to go for the gusto. And then just kind of a strange events happened. One of my best friends that I actually got him into, he came to me because he wanted to get into bodybuilding. He was in the powerlifting world. I got him into bodybuilding, coached him for his first, 4 or 5 shows. And then we, really formed a friendship beyond just coach and client. And we're, he's one of my best friends. And we'd get on the phone every day doing our fasted cardio, and we would, BSing and talking this and that. And he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, can I go? Would you be upset if I went and worked with another coach? I really want to get another, an outside perspective on everything. And just learn how to do this from maybe, I know there's other ways to skin a cat. I just want to learn." And I said, "Dude, I totally understand. I've worked with tons of coaches myself. I understand that. No harm, no foul." So he went and did that. And I will say we had a lot of conversations. I remember that year, because some of the protocols and some of the things he was doing, I was not happy with. And I really was warning him and telling him to be careful. And I didn't like some of the stuff that was that he was doing. I am trying to be vague, but it was very extreme, especially for an amateur level guy. And my friend already he had a very distended abdomen, and it was something him and I had worked on trying to bring in. And so it did concern me, but not enough. I guess not enough. I don't know how to, really say it on that. It was just one of those things that we just tried to work together to fix and to bring his, core tighter. But long story short, I was at the point, like I said, where I was looking at my very best. I was ready. I was wanting to go, and I was going to do a show at the end of the year, try to qualify for nationals, go to nationals, and really try to see what I could really do and where I could stack up, and he ended up dying. And so when he died, it was like, number one, it was extremely difficult, and it made me question everything I was doing, so that was part of it. And so initially I just said I was going to take a break, and I just, kind of took a step back from everything. I went and got blood work. And at that point I just flipped and was like, I just want to get healthy right now, and I'll reconvene with bodybuilding, but I'm going to now focus gears on my career for a little bit. And that helped me take my mindset off of him and his death. And so that's what I did. And I was able to do a lot of really cool things in my career, made some really cool jumps through my career that, people told me, "You won't be able to do that. You're still too young. You don't got the time in, blah, blah, blah." And I did. And I did that. And then from there, I was able to end up promoting, and I made sergeant, and, did some other really kind of cool stuff. And 2020, I was actually working, I used to take inmates out to go fight fires. And so I was working in the fire system before I had promoted out to sergeant. And well, it was the worst. I'm sure you watched the news, both 2020, 2021, it was the worst fire season California ever saw. Yeah. So here I am, Mr. Bodybuilder, right? Like, I'm still stuck in my meathead ways of having to eat every 2 hours and having to be in the gym 5 to 6 days a week and having to get my cardio, and all these different things. And next thing you know, I'm literally chasing fires all over California, and I'm eating basically state issued food. And I'm happy if I can shower once in a 5-day period sometimes, let alone get to the gym. Right. And my food at that point was like whatever bagged that give you the state would issue you out these 24-hour lunches. And you basically living off that as you're out in the middle of the woods, watching these inmates and they're fighting. It's just crazy. Pure chaos is the best way to put it. And, in my head, I'm thinking, man, when am I going to be able to get back to bodybuilding? Because this is nuts, So I'd get a few workouts in at the Cal Fire stations whenever I could, So I was lucky. I was able to still get 2 or 3 workouts in a week, but nothing close to what I wanted. So fire season finally ends. And mind you, back in 2019, I also had a quad tear at the beginning of the year that I had to mend, and I was able to get back from it, but it did slow me down a little bit. Well, in 2020, what was that? 2021. So last year, I want to say it was like fire season just ended. I want to say it was like March. I was like, I'm going to try to make a comeback. I'm going to try to get back into it. I got my diet all dialed in. I'm back in the gym, starting to look like a bodybuilder again, starting to get back in that mindset, feeling really good, consistent in the gym. Everything's dialed, right? And it's just like it's literally like a random, just a normal every other Tuesday, right? Like nothing special. I'm working out. I'm doing bench press, and which I've done 1,000 times. Like I mentioned, there was a time where I benched 615 for a double in a single ply shirt. And so here I am I think I was doing like 385. I just repped it out 10 times. No big deal. I'd already warmed up a ton. I used the same weight. I'm going to do the same reps. I was going to do 4 sets of 10 with 385 once I'd warmed up to it. So I go to do it again. The second I unrack it, my entire pec explodes right off the bone. Boom, just flies off. Weight goes flying, right? The whole bit. And I ended up having just basically a catastrophic injury, and ended up having to go in. They had to take my bicep off so they could reattach my pec and then put the bicep back over. So literally this whole half of my body was, for almost, 8 months, completely just toast, And so that was pretty much where I just decided. But the irony of that is, when I stepped away from being so focused on competing and bodybuilding and all that stuff for myself, it's when my coaching business skyrocketed. I mean, it absolutely just like to a whole nother level, right? I mean, it was insane. Like I just never seen anything like it. And that kind of it was one of those things where it's like, sometimes things happen in life that are so bad and you think, oh man, this is the worst thing ever. I remember being so depressed when it first happened. And in all reality, I think it was actually a blessing. I think it slowed me down, and it kind of resealed that switching gears was the right thing for me to do, because my business absolutely flourished, and all these different events that happened were what led me to where I'm at now, with a trajectory that's just been fantastic, and it hasn't stopped. So it's been, that was kind of the long story of kind of how it all came together. But
I appreciate you sharing it, because that's your life. It's your story, and it's awesome, man. Now we gotta touch on, your mini Ronnie Coleman that you coach, who's been a guest on the podcast, who qualified for the Open men's bodybuilding Olympia this year, Tonio Burton.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's known now as the Predator. He used to be the Mutant. And when I had him on, I was like, all right, dude. I said, we've got Nick Walker, the Mutant. We got Tonio Burton, the Mutant. I said, who's the true mutant? And then all of a sudden I heard him on Muscular Development. He's got the Predator nickname, which I love that. But you've got to tell us, I know he's out there in Reno, so I'm sure you guys cross paths at some time, but talk to me about how you got connected with Tonio. Obviously, I mean, he's got a physique that is just, it's mind blowing. Awesome personality. I had a great talk with him. Really cool dude. Just talk about him a little bit, and then what's your guys' relationship and just the evolution of Tonio, because he was in the 212 Mr. Olympia last year. I believe he got 10th. And now he's in the Open men's Olympia this year. So talk to us.
So Tonio, he was that guy that I saw in the gym. This is back in 2019. I had seen him around the gyms a few times. He was playing football back then. And I remember telling him, like, you need to get into bodybuilding. Like, what are you doing, man? Like, trust me, you could be an absolute star. You just have and we're talking back then, he wasn't even close to the weight he's at now, right? He's on probably 188 pounds or something, but it just hung on him different, right? It just looked, the way his muscle and everything, just his structure, everything just looked so different. And that was back when, without even trying. And so I kind of mentioned to it, and he's like, I don't want to wear the, what he called him, I don't want to wear the thong on stage, blah, 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 blah. All right, dude. All right. So fast forward, I think somehow someone got into his head. I think they said they'd sponsor him to do it. And so some local, I think, nutrition shop got him to do a show. And I think he ended up winning the show, or at least winning the division he was in, the weight class. And I remember seeing him, and it was Fitness for 10 out there in Sparks, Nevada. And I was like, man, so you finally did it, huh? And he's like, yeah, you know, blah, 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 blah. And this is again 2019. So my brand and everything at that point had been pretty well known. And so I was like, look, man, I'd love to work with you. I was like, I guarantee, and I'm not, you'll find with me, like, I'm a straight shooter. I don't blow smoke. And I was like, I guarantee I could get you a pro card, dude. And you could be on a whole nother level. And sure shit, right then he's like, oh, you think so? And I'm like, yeah. And so I prepped him for his, he was qualified for at that point. So he did win the show because he had gotten, and I forget what show, I think it was Motherload or something of that nature. But so then he ended up working with him. We prepped for USAs. We win USAs. And then we go on to do the Indy, his first pro show, wins the Indy. So he wins his pro debut, which you rarely ever hear about. Then we go on to do the Olympia in the 212 division. But at this point, in that year of work, it was a little over a year at that point, just because of COVID and everything, the way it transpired. He was put on so much size, you know, his body just wanted to grow. And I could tell that the 212 weight class, having to make weight, even though it was only a few pounds, that was really, you know, but it really took from his physique. You could tell it was really taking, because his big thing is not only to have those lines and that shape, but he's got that roundness, you know, those muscle bellies and everything. And so it would pull from that. So it pulled from the whole look. And so he ended up taking 10th at the Olympia in the 212 division. And I said, hey, so there's a show in like three or 4 weeks, I think it was. It's called the Legion. It's a pretty big show. They had Sergio Olivia doing it. They had
Sean Clarita.
Sean Clarita was there, and Regan Grimes was doing it. I mean, you had some pretty big Charles, what's his name? Charles, I saw him get his pro card actually. What's his name? Charles. Anyways, you had a couple, just some really big names, you know, some of the top dudes doing it. And I was like, you should throw your name in the hat. I was like, I think you'll be really surprised with how you stack up. And I think there was at first a little bit of like a kind of like, oh, you sure? Like, dude, we're jumping right into the water with no time, you know? And I'm like, yeah, you'll be fine. I was like, you'll be absolutely fine. And then sure shit, he ends up taking third at his first open show. And if I remember right, I think he even beat Sergio Olivia, if I'm not mistaken, for that show. So that really showed that, like, hey man, you've got some potential. You've got some serious potential in the open. So then the following year we stayed in the open. We did 4 shows. He did pretty well in all of them, you know, second, third place wins across the board. And then for Legion, I had met with him in Missouri prior to that, and we really just started to focus, and we kind of came up with a different game plan than we had done before, which I don't do often. I'm kind of one of those, if it's not broke, let's not try to fix anything. But I did have some ideas, and we kind of test ran it, and it was working really well. And so we were able to bring a whole new Tonio to Legion, and I was able to be there for the whole thing. Like, I went up the week before with them and was able to really just kind of watch everything. You know, I had him send me pictures literally every day, like, you know, multiple times, like, okay, I need more pictures, just watching everything. And he ends up winning the Legion, you know, and it was hands down the best look he had ever brought, you know, bar none. And I was very happy with that look. And now with what we're doing currently and where he's looking and the trajectory we're on right now with the Olympia, I think people are going to be really, I think he's going to disturb kind of the current mix. I think, you know, we've always kind of been the underdog, you know, for a lot of times that nobody really saw him in that mix. And I think when you start seeing him stack up to some of these big guys, they might be a lot bigger, but just the overall package that Tonio is able to bring, the level of conditioning and fullness and the lines and the shape and everything, that when it all comes together, it exposes a lot of the bigger guys. And I think that's what's going to happen on this Olympia.
Is Tonio the first Olympian that you've had then?
Yeah, he was my first Olympian. Yep. Last year and then this year. And so now it's that was very cool. I mean, that was, like I said, kind of being myself, I still consider myself the new kid on the block, right? My coaching business really didn't, like I said, for me, until 2019, that was when I really started really kind of taking it to the whole nother level when I myself stopped bodybuilding. And so in that same year, to have taken a guy to the Olympia, or get him his pro card and go, the following year go to the Olympia, and then we're doing it again. It's like, it's been pretty awesome. It's been really cool. So I'm excited to see what we're able to bring for this one. I think people are going to be really surprised.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people they still don't even know about Tonio. I mean, he's not really in anybody's conversations and stuff. And you're right, man. Like, you look at his physique and it's like, you want to talk about a genetic freak, like a mini Ronnie Coleman. It's like, dude, he's got just that roundness and his pop. It's like, and his personality is just like, he's just a cool dude. I'm right with you. I think he's going to be, as they say, a problem for a lot of people. He's going to catch some people slipping, and I'm going to be happy for you guys, because good people. Now, I want to ask you, Mike, in terms of, like, you said that you've had quite a few coaches yourself in terms of when you were an athlete. Have you had any coaches that you would kind of consider like mentors, or maybe they have kind of given you some guidance in terms of, building your business, or has this really been kind of self-learned, self-taught?
So, yeah, I've worked with a lot of coaches. I've just always been so well-read myself, and always just a student of the game, always trying to learn, always trying to better my own knowledge base. I've still had that same kind of vacuum mentality of just trying to, just absorb as much knowledge as I can. I'll never sit there and say I know everything, but I'm always just trying to better myself. And I think, being stagnant is probably the worst thing you can do. When you stop learning is when you stop winning, in my opinion. And so, yeah, I've had a lot of coaches, but I kind of always had this struggle with, like, where I kind of questioned some of the stuff I was doing with certain coaches. And a lot of times just wished I was kind of doing it myself, if that makes sense. But I always like to have that other outside eye. But I have worked with a lot of coaches, and a lot of them did bring value, and I was able to see kind of what did or didn't work for me. And so I think it was all good. It all helped me kind of move in the direction I have. But I won't sit there and say that any of them were like a mentor, to be honest. I mean, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Males or females, which are, in terms of, we'll just stick with competitors. Which are easier to work with for you? Which ones are just like, okay, for the most part, tell them what to do, they do it? Guys or girls?
Man, that's tough. I've had drama queen dudes, and I've had women that are tougher than anyone. So it just depends on luck of the draw. Honestly, I've had some women that are so diehard, and then I've had other guys that have their hands held. And then sometimes you get that guy who's just diehard, and you get this girl who's a diva. So I don't know, man. I don't know if I have a straight answer on that. I think it's kind of just luck with the draw, different personalities.
Perfect. Okay. What's kind of like, maybe like when you were training, and if you are in charge of training protocol for your clients, like, what's kind of your training philosophy, or what have you found that works best for you and your clients, generally speaking? I know it's always going to be individualistic, but there's some sort of blueprint for most of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely think anybody can look at my programs and probably go, okay, like that's a Mike Courtney program, like, for sure. I'm very big on carb cycling, and I'm very big on not just carb cycling, but specifically around certain workouts. So be it like the big, the days that we're trying to prioritize, the muscle groups we're trying to prioritize, we're gonna have higher calories. Arm day is going to be a lower calorie kind of day. You know what I mean? I'm also very big on workout nutrition and nutrient timing as a whole, because I do believe that is, where we're trying to really optimize that window and make sure that the client or the athlete is at peak performance during that window right there. So making sure we have the right, pool of aminos to pull from in the bloodstream, making sure we have the right carbohydrates that are going to last throughout that lift, you know, and you know, and everything in and around it. So for me, that's also a very big like part. And then my workouts are extremely high volume, lots of drop sets, lots of supersets, just tons and tons of volume. Like I get that a lot from clients. They're like, oh my gosh, this is so much volume. And it is a lot of volume. I believe it takes a lot of volume, you know, when you're really trying to talk in that upper echelon, you know. Now, obviously, like, again, it's not a blanketed statement, right? Like I'm some amateur bodybuilder, they're not going to be on high volume training because they don't need it, right? They need just the stimulus they need. But you have some guy, you know, like a Tonio, or you have some of these guys that I train who have been in the gym for years and years and years, and they're going to need a lot more stimulus and a lot more volume to really have that stimulus, you know. And I don't always like just going heavier, because unfortunately that usually is a recipe for eventually there's a breaking point and there's usually going to be an injury. And so I try to keep my clients as injury free as possible, you know.
Do you encourage your clients to like keep track of their workouts and to log things, or is that kind of just the ball's in their court on that?
Ball's in their court on that. But I always tell them, like, a lot of times I'll send them workouts and there'll be like little question marks, and that's where they're supposed to write in their weight. I mean, as far as what they're, you know, the weight they're using and stuff. And I do believe in more of a progressive based program, so that I either want to see the reps going up or I want to see the weight going up each week. And if it's not, then I need to know why, you know, why isn't weight going up, you know, or reps going up or intensity going up, or one of those factors that's showing that we are moving forward in that programming. So a lot of that is kind of corresponded through the emails and the communication that I try to keep with all the clients.
Okay. I want to ask you this, out of the three categories, food, training, and drugs, if somebody is wanting to, you know, be the most elite bodybuilder possible, progress as much as possible, of those three, actually, why don't you just list the three: food, training, drugs? Like, what's the order of importance for those three?
Food, training, drugs.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, food is number one, hands down. I mean, if the building blocks aren't there, you can go to the gym till you're blue in the face, but if you're not getting enough of the nutrients that we need, then you're not going to build, and you're not going to recover, and you're not going to be, you know, performing at the level that we need to. So you have to have that first. From there, you have to have a good progressive workout program, you know, that's really built around your body and what you need to bring up. That's, you know what I mean? If we're talking from like a prep standpoint, like, you know, that's geared to, if your back is subpar, then we need to be focusing on that. We need to prioritize certain lifts and make sure the training split is all geared towards that. And then from there, it's going to be all the different bodybuilding supplements and drugs and everything else that go into it. And, you know, that's obviously, once we're talking again, that elite level, you know.
Yep. Okay. We're going to start wrapping up. What's one of your biggest pet peeves, or something that you see within the coaching industry that you don't like, or it's just distasteful, or just something of that nature? Because there's a lot of charlatans, I like to say, within the coaching industry, fitness industry. So what's something you just don't like, or you wish would just go away?
You've done it as long as I have. There's quite a bit.
Podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, dude, that you know what? We should do a podcast just on that. We'll get three coaches on here, and we all could just talk about all the problems in the fitness space, because there's quite a bit. I don't like the toxic, like, bashing each other. You see a lot of that, and that there's no need for it. There's a big enough piece of pie for everybody. But I would say probably the biggest thing, and it's because it makes all of us look bad, is these cookie cutter planned diets. And I see you've got somebody they've done one competition and they put out some cookie cutter plan to everybody, and they think that they're, you know, they could be a prep coach. And I'm like, how in the planet do you think that you have the knowledge base to troubleshoot people when you have only done one competition yourself, right? Like, where do you have the information? Because so much of it is anecdotal and you know, collective from years and years and years of living and breathing and doing this sport, you know?
Yeah. Okay. What's your biggest gym pet peeve, Mike?
I would say that douchey guy that spends more time posing in the mirror than actually lifting weights. That or the guy that has like the whole matching outfit is just, he's like, I don't know if he's going to the club or if he's going to the gym.
There you go. And he's videoing himself for his YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, his YouTube channel with 270 followers.
Good stuff, man. All right, Mike. I think we had a pretty thorough conversation, man. Like we said, we could probably have another couple podcast episodes just talking about some of the things in the industry, but we're gonna stop it right there, man. I know you got a lot going on. Before I do a really quick outro and I let you go, why don't you give us your Instagram, website, any shout outs, anything you want to leave us, final thoughts, final words, platform's yours, and then I'll wrap us up, Mike.
I appreciate it. Yeah. So thank you for having me on, man. I really appreciate the time to get on and talk to your viewers. And my website is teamcourtneycoaching.com. And my Instagram is team_Courtney_coaching. So give me a follow, shoot me a DM if you guys have any questions, anything you want to talk about. I'm pretty open. I'm an open board, talking about anything you got, open book.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate your time today. Okay.
All right, man. You have a great day.
You too. Thank you. All of you who are tuning in to another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast. Thank you so much. Quickly, as we wrap up this conversation with Mike today, if you have not done so already, please hit that subscribe button on YouTube and also take this episode, share it on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Mike, tag Behind the Muscle so that we know that you specifically listened to this episode and found great value in it, in which I know you did. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.
Thank you.